Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner of Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner of Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner of Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner of Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Minister Coleman Ford from the Village Church in South Lake. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Thank you, Judge Whitley. Before we pray, a reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people, in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Let's pray. Holy God, we approach you today knowing that the task is weighty. And Lord, we are prone to want others to see our works, others to see the good things we do and to praise us. But Lord, I pray that our work here today would be humble, would be for the service of others, and that, Lord, we would not boast in anything but you and your goodness. Lord, we are prone to want authority and power, but you alone are the greatest authority and the most powerful. You alone have all sovereignty, all power, all authority over our lives. So would we approach today knowing that you are with us, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that we would have wisdom this day, and that we would look to the truly righteous one, Jesus Christ. And we pray this in his name. Amen.
Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor, Members of Court. While we don't have any changes on the agenda today, we have several announcements. First of all, we are not going to have Commissioners Court next week. Our next court meeting will be on the 23rd. And then secondly, and today is something that we all need to be aware of, in that we're going to NACO next week. And currently, Tarrant County is the only county in the United States that's a member of NACO that has had two past presidents sitting on an active commissioner's court at the same time. And that's Commissioner Brooks and Judge Whitley. It's my understanding that that will change after next week, but until then, congratulations to both of you, and congratulations to this Commissioner's Court for having such a team that we run a national program. And both of you gentlemen have done a great job on that. So,
Thank you very much.
you know,
It's been an honor to follow in Judge Whitley's footsteps.
And none of it could have been possible without the support of everybody else on this team.
Absolutely.
And we thank you very much. And as Mr. Manius mentioned, next week, Marianne Borgerson will take the reins at NACO, and she is from Douglas County. And prior to her, Chris Rogers was president about 2 years after I was for NACO. So we've got a year for both past presidents, but you're right, we'll have two on the executive, or two presidents on the dais at the same time, and so we're looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. We're looking to accomplish a lot of stuff. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of July the 2nd.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We don't have any proclamations or resolutions today, but I do want us to remember the Perot family. We got news this morning that Ross Perot Sr. passed away. And so they have been a big part of this area, this community for the last few decades.
30 years, 30-something.
And I think, Senior was someone who was well respected. He was one of a kind, and he will be missed by this community, by this nation, and really by this world. So let's keep that family in our prayers as we go forward for this week.
And then also, many of you may have heard that Dr. Susan Hull, who's the superintendent of Grand Prairie ISD, that she passed. Reading from a statement that the school district issued, that she was critically injured in a motorcycle accident while on vacation in Arizona. Thankfully, her loving family was with her at the time of her death, and service details are pending. She was a Texas educator for 39 years, serving as a teacher, coach, principal, and superintendent, and she was in her 12th year as a superintendent of Grand Prairie ISD. And in 2005, she was selected as the Texas Superintendent of the Year by the Texas Association of School Boards and the Texas Association of School Administrators. She also received a gubernatorial appointment to the State Board of Educator certification and served there for 2 years. Now, of course, Grand Prairie ISD is largely in Dallas County, but with it being an open enrollment district and given all the work that she's done for students and families throughout the state, I wanted to be sure to recognize her passing.
And one more, if you would. This past week, we lost Dr. Wright Lassiter, Jr., who was chancellor for many years of the Dallas County Community College District and chairman of the board of the African American Museum in Dallas. He also happened to be the father of Wright Lassiter III, who was a senior executive officer for many years with John Peter Smith Hospital. Wright III has gone on to be CEO at Alameda County Hospital in California and is currently CEO of the Henry Ford Medical Center in Michigan. But we trained him. So please keep that family in your prayers as well.
Ms. Tidwell.
The consent agenda, I move
We
approval.
probably ought to do that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Tidwell.
We have 2 items we're asking the court to consider this morning. The first is approval and release of the $12,992,000 of collateral as outlined in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our other item, we're asking the court to receive and file the auditor's report related to the fourth floor administration project. I have only 2 short comments that I'll make on that. One is appreciation to Mr. Phillips for his assistance and his professionalism in helping us resolve and get to the point where we are with our audit. And the second is simply to encourage the court to consider strongly adopting the recommendations of policy changes that we've included in the audit. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Y'all figure it out. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Glenn, Ms. Worthy, Ms. Glenn's vacation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our first item is request that you receive and file the personnel agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The second item is an approval for out-of-class pay extension for the County Administrator's Office effective July 19th. This is entirely offset, or costs are offset by salary savings, so there is no cost.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We have a second approval for out-of-class pay extension for budget and risk management. Again, the cost will be entirely offset by salary savings.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beecham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have two items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2019-137. It's an RFP for behavioral risk factor surveillance survey for the Public Health Department. Recommendation be to award to Issues and Answers Network Incorporated, amount of $297,500.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Second and last item is also a bid award recommendation for RFP 2019-148. This is an RFP for grant writing services, again for the Public Health Department. Recommendation be to award to Ardent Spirit on a per hourly labor rate.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Jake. Commissioner Allen, I believe you have an interlocal.
I do. I'd like to move for approval of item 7L1A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any
Why
discussion?
is there no B? The permission to
This is
start.
simply an amendment to an existing
It's an
agreement.
amendment.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments? I believe I have an appointment of Chastity Meredith to the Historical Commission. Have y'all got resumes? I'm supposed to have resumes, but I don't know that
No, I don't.
Here we go. Hang on, I might just add.
I'll second your motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Maines?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have one item for you this morning. I'm going to introduce it, but Mr. Taylor is going to go ahead and do the major part of the briefing. This concerns the regulation of game room operations in Tarrant County. You might recall that we have had some comment and discussion at the court level on this, and our intent was to delay any further discussion until the legislative session was completed. We're now at that point, and we want to begin those discussions again. As I said, Chris is going to come up here and talk about the details. Just one or two comments, though, as he comes up here. I think that there needs to be some analysis of this ordinance yet. We're still working on it. We need to confer with the Sheriff's Department because there's some roles that they play in it. We've noticed some different conversations between our office and the DA's office about some potential wording changes, and we're just working through it. But now is a great time to begin those discussions so that we can get to a point that the court can have a decision package as how they want to move forward. And with that, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Before Chris comes, I want to thank the administrator's office for finally getting this to a point where we can discuss it as a commissioner's court. I understand that there was considerable, probably prayer that the legislature would let this cup pass from us to someone else. That didn't happen. It is our responsibility as delegated to us by the legislature in a previous session to regulate this activity in our communities. There are game rooms proliferating throughout Tarrant County. They are operating in each and every precinct, and they are a danger to the public health and safety in our communities. And they cry out, and the citizens who live in those communities cry out for us to do something to regulate this activity. So this is our time to consider an ordinance that is based upon the one passed in Harris County. I am assured that it does not do violence to ordinances already passed by local communities like Arlington, who is well pleased with what they've got. Under this ordinance, they can continue doing what they are doing. But it's time for us to step up and to assume the responsibility given to us by the legislature. So thank you to the administrator and to the DA's office for working this up for us to get it to the point where we can discuss it.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks, and good morning, Judge and Commissioners.
Morning.
Before I begin, I did have a few items I wanted to hand out to the court. One is a copy of our regulations or proposed regulations, and the other is kind of an executive summary of these regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, it's my goal today to kind of provide a general overview of this court's authority to regulate game rooms, but also a general overview of our proposed Tarrant County game room regulations. And to begin, Chapter 234 of the Texas Local Government Code gives this court expansive authority to regulate game rooms. And the definition of game room in the Local Government Code is any for-profit business that has 6 or more of these 8-liner machines. So anything less than that, statutorily, would not fall under these provisions, but this court has authority to do a lot of things with game rooms pursuant to that statute. I feel the best way to kind of go through these regulations is the same way that I kind of set up the summary that I handed out today, is to kind of start by going through the process of obtaining the permission to operate a game room in Tarrant County if these regulations are someday passed. And in doing that, the first thing that we have to realize is that in order for someone to operate a game room, that they must have a permit to do so. The Chapter 234 of the Local Government Code, as well as these regulations, say that if an individual wants to operate this game room within the confines of the county, and that's anywhere in the county, both the incorporated or unincorporated portions of the county, that they must obtain permission to do so through a licensing process here with what we call the game room administrator. Now, this court gets to determine who serves as the game room administrator. The Harris County model, as Commissioner Brooks alluded to, and it was also adopted by Galveston County, they have said, and I think these regulations say, that the county sheriff serves as the game room administrator. So that would be the main person within the county that these individuals or any applicant that wishes to operate a game room under our game room regulations would have to go to the game room administrator, ask for an application, submit a completed application, and receive a permit before they can open their game room. During this process, they cannot operate the game room. They cannot start setting up their game room until they have a permit in hand. Now, the licensing process, in order to have this game room permit, they have to pay a fee. Now, the Chapter 234 allows this court to set a fee for the permitting process up to $1,000. Both Galveston and Harris County both set their fee at $1,000. So an individual will have to go to the game room administrator, pay $1,000 with their completed application fee.
Chris, excuse me a minute.
Yes, sir.
Don't these proposed regulations provide that the game room administrator shall be either the county sheriff or whoever this court should designate as the game room administrator through interlocal agreement?
That is absolutely correct, Commissioner. The Harris County model and the Galveston model and it allows for there to be a particular game room administrator set by the county. Now, the Harris County model allows the county to, through ILAs, through interlocal agreements, to set up and allow these municipalities to have their own administrative model to basically run our regulations themselves and to kind of have control within their municipality. So that would, at that point, if, let's say, for instance, the city of Fort Worth wanted to have an ILA with the county and they had an ILA, then the sheriff's department would not, or the sheriff's, or whoever this court designates to be the game room administrator, would not do the administrative process of licensing and enforcement. That would be up to that particular municipality.
That is a key provision of these proposed regulations, and to not mention it up front is to kind of bury the lead.
Absolutely. That is the way that these things are set up, that this regulation is set up. This court, of course, makes the decision and will set its own game room administrator, but you still have that ILA process. Because, of course, in the unincorporated areas of Tarrant County, whoever this court designates to be the game room administrator would still facilitate that permitting process. Or if there's any municipality that does not have an ILA with the county, with the sheriff or whoever this court designates will still be the primary administrator over that permitting process. Now, once the application...
Let me be sure I understand what you just said.
Yes, sir.
We know that Arlington and Fort Worth both have, Arlington has a procedure in place right now.
Yes.
So once we pass these regulations, do we need to enter into an interlocal agreement with them or an ILA to allow them to continue doing what they're doing, and that our administrator, whoever we select, therefore will not really do anything within the city of Arlington? That'll be left up to the city through our ILA, and I'm assuming that as a result of that, whatever fee they choose to set for that licensing, they will set and they will collect and use that to administer the program within their particular community.
That is correct. If the city of Fort Worth or the city of Arlington has an ILA with the county, then the county game room administrator would not do the licensing process, nor will they do any of the enforcement, unless, of course, the municipality with the ILA wants that to occur. So the city of Arlington wants to do it themselves or kind of do what they're doing or do the enforcement by themselves. That would be within that ILA, within the confines of that ILA. Yes,
I would not anticipate it, but what happens if our regulations are stricter than the city, one of the 41 cities within Tarrant County? Then can we choose not to enter into the ILA with that particular city and therefore continue to be the one that administers the regulations within that city limit?
Judge, with permission, that's a question I would prefer to answer under advice of counsel in a closed session environment, but I can definitely address that for you. And I think that's probably the best place to address it at that time. But after this application is completed and the fee is paid, what happens at that point is the game room administrator or his designee would appoint an inspector to go do up to 3 inspections of the location of that game room. So the inspector walks in, he makes sure that everything is proper, that the regulations have been followed as far as the location of that game room, and if, of course, if they pass on the first time, then they can move forward with the permitting process. If they fail 3 times, yes, Commissioner.
Okay. What if? Okay, you're going to make an application for a game room permit. Typically, a new business or a business, they got to have a place to put that game room. Tarrant County doesn't have anything to do with that, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
That's, if it's in a city, they've got to file for a, quote, building permit, maybe to finish it out, or a certificate of occupancy. And after reading all this, it's my guess they're probably going to have to do some modifications to the space, so they're going to end up getting a building permit. Okay, so you got a building permit process going on that has inspections, and then you got a game room permit operation that has different inspections. Is this correct? And are we running 2 different? We're running a permit for a game room, and somebody's running a permit to finish out a space, in all likelihood.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
I anticipate they will not happen simultaneously, because what will happen is they'll have to go with the city, and in their application, they have to show that they have the proper permits with the city, they had the fire inspection done, that they had everything they needed to move into that into that space before they actually submit the game room application.
So you're assuming that they have also hired their personnel, because they got all their personnel have to have criminal background checks, correct?
Yes.
You can't hire anybody that's got any kind of major criminal background. So they got to hire all these people, and they don't have a facility yet, which could take, 2 weeks, could take 12 months, to build. I don't know.
No, not necessarily, Commissioner. They don't have to have their entire staff in place. They have to have the location in place, because the regulations are very specific as to what the building has to look like. Now, you can go get the facilities ready, submit your game room application, and then hire your people afterwards. Now, the regulations will allow local law enforcement or any designee from the county or the game room administrator to go inside of that game room to make sure that the records are up to date, to make sure that they're operating lawfully, and to make sure that all of the individuals that work there have the proper background checks, to make sure that they are being paid properly, and to make sure that they're lawful to work.
You don't check the background of the employees prior to issuing your permit? Because it kind of says you do, I thought.
Well, anyone that you've hired up to that point, yes, Commissioner. You don't. So if you start a game room and you hired 9 people already, that's going to be employees of that particular game room, or the applicants that are involved in the game room process, then you must show that all of those people are properly there. Now, it does not say that you necessarily have to have these individuals in place yet, but if you do have them in place, then you have to have the proper documentation. So you can have everything ready to go and all your employees in place and then file your application, or you can have all the building stuff ready to go, get your permit to open that game room, and then hire individuals at that time. You don't have to hire them before the application's filed, though. So I think that's kind of the difference. And
in this instance, it's no different from an owner who wants to open a bar.
Absolutely.
They have to go get the requisite building permits to build and finish out that bar. And then they have to go to the state to get a liquor license. And one has nothing to do with the other. They're 2 separate processes.
That's
but
absolutely
they do
correct.
run simultaneously, because I see
They can.
I see a lot of restaurants under construction that have posted this big poster that the TABC requires that you post that a liquor license has been filed for.
Absolutely. And now, they don't have to necessarily be hiring at the time. They could say, I'm going to get my liquor license, and then after I am legally able to open.
I'm not sure that the same requirements to work in a bar, not own a bar, but work in a bar, are as strenuous as the requirements to work in a game room.
And I'm not sure about the requirements to work in a bar, but I do know that our regulations, the Harris County regulations, the Galveston County regulations, require that they have a background check, require that they're, of course.
I'm all for this. Don't think I'm not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't want us to get into some quagmire here in debates with some owner who thinks he's got something in hand when he maybe really doesn't. Or he has entitlements to do something that maybe he really doesn't until he gets a whole bunch more further down the road.
Now, the employment requirements for a game room are similar to that of sexually oriented business, similar to that of a bar, similar to that of a liquor store. I think any of what you consider to be somewhat illicit businesses or undesirable businesses in some circumstances, the employment requirements are relatively similar. And in this circumstance, you have the opportunity to present that evidence beforehand or present that evidence afterwards as well. And that can happen during the inspection process, or that can happen after the inspection process. But those 3 inspections have to be done within 60 days. So if it's not done within 60 days, if the applicant is not pushing it to happen within 60 days, then that's a denial of the game room permit application.
Let me ask, and I don't mean to ask all the questions, but how long has Houston and Harris and Galveston had their ordinances in place?
Galveston had theirs for a few months now. I think 2 months ago, Galveston just adopted their game room permit regulations. Harris County for a couple of years. I'm not quite sure the exact date.
Do you know if anybody's ever actually gotten a permit?
4 years.
4 years in Harris County?
4 years.
Oh, Harris County had theirs for 4 years. I do know that.
Has anybody ever gone through this?
In Harris County, yes, there have been game rooms. Now, admittedly, it's a strenuous process. It's kind of like wanting to open up, as Commissioner Brooks said, wanting to open up a bar. That's a strenuous process as well.
Yeah.
And people have gone through that and do go through that. Same thing with the game room process.
And we want it to be a strenuous
I agree,
process.
but the 8-to-8 deal I see is.
And that's still a decision that this court has to make. That was kind of the initial recommendation, or what we put forth. Now, there's still a lot, and as GK kind of alluded to, there's still a lot of decisions for this court to make, to identify the game room administrator, to identify the hours, to identify who's going to be the hearing examiner, which I'm going to get to in a minute. There's still a lot of things to kind of tweak and play with, and I think the hours is one of them. But that's the initial that we have in our current version of the Tarrant County game room regs.
What about the existing game rooms?
The existing game rooms will have to come under the process as well. So if you have an existing game room, you'll have to, and the part of the issue, Commissioner Johnson, is that a lot of these game rooms that we have been seeing, and I think you'll get some testimony today on this issue, that a lot of these game rooms may not be operating in accordance with what our regulations are going to be. So the hope is to bring kind of this cohesive formulaic regulation so that all the game rooms would be operating similarly and would be operating the same way and lawfully.
So they would have to go through the process, make application, go through the inspections and so forth and so on, but
Absolutely.
Can they keep operating until all of that's completed? Or?
No, the current intimation of these regulations, they will have to, once they're passed, they would have to come under these regulations. Now, of course, that's up to this court whether they want to allow that. But part of the issue is you're assuming that those game rooms are operating lawfully, and part of the issue is we simply don't know. Now, as soon as these regulations are passed, if you're operating a game room, and of course the definition is 6 or more, a for-profit business with 6 or more 8-liners, as soon as they pass, they consent, if they have 6 or more 8-liners, they consent for local law enforcement or the designee from the county to walk into that game room and to ensure that they are operating lawfully. So they give consent for operating a game room. They give consent to be inspected.
Is nothing, there's no rules, anything, if you have 5 or less.
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
If you have 5 8-liners or less, no rules, no restrictions?
Not at the county level, no, sir. Now, of course, if someone's operating a game room, which would, if you have 5 or less of these 8-liners, it wouldn't be a game room pursuant to the statute. But if they have 5 or less game rooms, then the municipalities can of course, do what they're doing now. I think the city of Fort Worth has their own municipalities. City of Arlington is doing their own thing, but the county-wide regulations only touch 6 or more. And I kind of wanted to talk about the application, as I know, Commissioner Fickus, you've asked what needs to be part of this application. You've asked kind of about that process, but when they submit the application, it has to be considered complete. And that application includes a current annual fire inspection report from a fire safety official, a copy of the certificate of occupancy, so you have to make sure that they're able to operate in that municipality, a copy of the diagram or floor plan included, in that particular building, a true and correct copy of the assumed name certificate, the application fee, of course, a photocopy of the applicant's driver's license. We want to identify this person. And then any of the exemptions. There's a series of exemptions here. Like if you want to have alcohol present, you have to have a TABC license.
I hate to interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
Mention a certificate of occupancy.
Absolutely.
How do you give a certificate of occupancy if you don't have a permit for a game room?
See, the permit is process is completely separate from the certificate of occupancy. So if I wanted to go and open up a building,
It is to you, but the city, because of the nature of the business, there's a permit required, a game room permit.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to issue a CO if you don't have that permit?
And
how are you going to approve their game room permit if they don't have a CO?
And sorry.
The certificate of occupancy merely says you can go in there and start doing things. But you can't start doing this particular thing unless you've got
and you don't have a
permit.
Certificate of occupancy.
You got a certificate of occupancy, you can go in there and occupy. You just can't be a game room.
Well, I think most cities are specific about what a certificate of occupancy is. You get one for a restaurant. It has certain guidelines. You get one
Absolutely.
for a retail store.
Absolutely, and a couple manners to address that, Commissioner Fickus, and first and foremost being, if one opens, say, a bar, and they get a certificate of occupancy before a bar, that certificate of occupancy is typically granted before the TABC licensing comes through. And so you don't have this kind of negating process in which they can't get a certificate of occupancy unless they have a game room permit. But even if that is an issue, then my guess or my assumption would be that you would have to work with the municipalities in order to kind of resolve that issue. So maybe it's if they get a game room permit, then we would grant a game room certificate of occupancy. But what we have to make sure is that they are able to operate in that building before we give the permit.
So let me ask this, I guess along this line, and maybe this is the distinguishing factor. I think you're talking about a building that's being built for the sole purpose of having a game room in it.
It could be a tenant. It could be a shopping center.
I understand.
10 tenants in it. You got a vacant space.
But what I'm saying is
Somebody's got to get a certificate of occupancy.
But if it was a bar, or if it was a convenience store, or if it was anything else, and they wanted to have another room in the back where they put up these machines, they might be able to build that room and get a certificate of occupancy without having to specify specifically what it was for. In a situation where it's the whole space, and it's gonna be a game room. I can't tell you I'm familiar with city. I know you have worked, certainly as the mayor of the city, y'all have gone through that process, and you're certainly more aware of what the requirements are sometimes to get those certificates of occupancy. But it seems to me like there's two different factors. There's one where we're building a building or occupying a space solely for the purpose of a game room, and there's others, I'm assuming, it seems like what I have heard in the past is there may be a convenience store with a room in the back, there may be maybe it's a bar with a room in the back. I don't know, but there is two purposes for what the entire space is being utilized for.
And Judge, I think you are correct to the extent that sometimes you have this kind of multi-purpose building, a multi-purpose situation, and that is true. But I still submit that even if that's not the case, it's kind of what Commissioner Brooks stated, is when you're applying for the certificate of occupancies, and of course, we don't deal with the certificate of occupancy, these are the municipalities, but in my time dealing with municipalities, you have a building and you're simply asking, may I occupy this building for this purpose? That may or may not happen. If that does not happen, if you don't get the permit, then you either get a different certificate of occupancy for that particular instance, or you don't occupy it.
And again, as Commissioner Fick has mentioned, I also am not a big fan of these things, but I don't want to end up creating a regulation that creates the chicken or the egg theory, and then we end up in court because somebody who wants to put these in is going to sue us for the fact that there's no way in hell, under our regulations, that anyone can get through the process.
I completely agree. These regulations are not meant to keep or to be an arbitrary roadblock for anyone to get a game room.
I want to make it tough,
but
I don't want to make it impossible.
If you follow the rules, you'll get a game room permit. Okay. That's what they're made for. But the biggest thing is to make sure they follow the rules.
Okay.
Right?
Because if we make it impossible, we're going to get sued.
Absolutely.
I'm going to get sued anyway. But if we make it impossible, we're going to get sued.
Absolutely. This is not meant to make sure that no one can operate a game room. It's just to make sure we know that the people that are operating a game room are doing so lawfully. Okay. And I think that's what the concern is. But moreover, from that application, is kind of the stuff I went through. That application process is lengthy. It allows us to identify the person. It allows us to make sure that they're using it for the proper reason. And it allows us to also identify anyone kind of involved with that game room.
My only suggestion would be to either talk to somebody who does municipal law for a living, or get a hold of a couple cities that have ordinances that dovetail with the state regulation, and see if there's any difference and any conflict with what a city might do and what this law says.
And Commissioner Fickus, I've spoken to individuals in the city attorney's office from the city of Fort Worth and the city of Arlington. I believe one of which has submitted, from the city of Arlington, has submitted a comment card as well and will be commenting.
Okay.
But I haven't heard any, in both of which we're hoping that we were adopting the Harris County model, which is what we've followed. And so I haven't heard any objections yet as to any potential legal roadblocks. The city of Fort Worth has their own legal issues, but with their municipalities. But I think they will marry fine.
Okay.
Just a general comment on that. First of all, in Harris County, the city of Houston contracts to be the game room administrator. And
They do what?
They contract to be the game room administrator in their jurisdiction. And we have not,
in a local agreement.
yes, yes, and we have not heard any issues concerning, this chasing your tail type.
So the city of Houston does it for all of Harris County?
No, the city of Houston does it for the city of Houston.
Okay.
Okay. And second of all, I think it also points out that in order for this to work fairly fluently, that it would be very, very good for the cities to take on that responsibility, since they issue the COs and they would be issuing the licenses also. As Chris has said, this is, as long as an applicant meets the qualifications, then the license is issued. It's the same way with our sexually oriented businesses. As long as they meet the requirements, we have to issue that license. in which we do.
So if someone builds a building in the unincorporated area, we don't have a process by which we have to do it. We can't.
No CO.
Randy is raising his hand back there, which means
Well-
I guess he says he goes in and inspects the space, but we don't issue a CO.
We don't issue a CO, but the building has to have several things. First of all, it has to have a fire inspection. Second of all, the structure itself has to have signage that's required. I think it's 4 inches on every entrance. And third of all, it has to have a transparent, what they call a transparent window, just like our sexually oriented businesses, where that you can look into the facility without having to go through the front door. And that's a state requirement. That's what's incorporated in this proposed ordinance.
Okay. Continue on.
And GK already got to some of the regulations, but I wanted to make sure this court understood what the basic regulations were once a game room permit has been obtained. And part of that regulations, as he alluded to, you have to plainly identify yourself as a game room. There are sign requirements. Typically, nowadays, some of the game rooms would not identify themselves as game rooms. They may be a gift shop or whatever. We want to make sure that people know where these game rooms are. You can see these game rooms, and when you look at them, you know exactly what's happening inside of these game rooms. That's why you have to be able to see inside of them. No more of the tinted windows to an extent to where you can't see inside the game room and see what's going on. No more locked doors at the entrance and the exit of those buildings. No more passwords to get into these things. The public has to be able to walk in and out of a game room. There are record-keeping requirements. There are limited hours in which this court can decide what the hours are that a game room can operate. There are also distance restrictions from schools and other game rooms. Our current regulations put the distance requirement from 1,500 feet from a school into a neighborhood and 2 miles from between game rooms. So you don't get a game room area, kind of like a Las Vegas Strip situation. You have 2 miles between each game room. Now, the next step is what happens if a game room permit is denied. There's an administrative process in which that particular applicant can go through if they felt like they were wrongfully denied a game room permit. So if the game room administrator denies a permit, of course there will be a reason behind that particular denial. He'll say it was denied because you did not follow this portion of the application process. So the applicant, if he receives a denial of his application, has 14 days to submit an appeal to the game room administrator. From that time, once he files it in person with the game room administrator, the commissioner's court can do so beforehand, or at that point must appoint a game room hearing examiner. So that's basically an administrative appellate court. So the game room administrator or his designee and the applicant for the game room can both have counsel there, and they have a hearing to determine what the reasoning was for that denial and whether it was proper within the confines of the county's regulations.
For the sake of clarity, should we delegate the game room administrative function to a local municipality, then they will create the hearing situation. They will appoint the hearing examiner, and all of that will take place under the auspices of that city to whom we've delegated that authority, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Brooks. If you have an interlocal agreement with a particular municipality, the way it's functioned so far in Harris County and Galveston County is that that particular municipality would do the entirety of the administrative process. So if there's a denial from that game room administrator, then whoever in that municipality, the city council, or whoever they designate, will then appoint a game room hearing examiner. Now, it should be someone complete and separate from the game room administrator and whoever decided that particular issue, because it's kind of like a mini hearing.
That's up to the city.
That's up to the city,
And
absolutely.
if we're gonna do it within the county, then what we might do within the county is appoint one of our county court at law judges or someone along that type of line,
Absolutely, yes, sir.
much as we do with our alcohol appeals. or our-
Chris, what happens if a city, that they like the Texas law that we, county has, and they don't want to have their own game room administrator or an appeals person, which you said both sides are able to bring their lawyer in. So whoever that person is ought to be a lawyer or a judge. That's an expense that a small city, and that could be, any city under 40, 50,000 people, because most cities that size and smaller don't have own staff attorneys. They have contract attorneys.
That's true.
That could be a significant expense, depending on how many people actually go through this process.
Well, I'm assuming though that if we have the interlocal agreement, both parties have to agree to it. So if they don't want to enter into an interlocal agreement, then we got them. And if we don't want to enter into an interlocal agreement with them, we got them.
We still got it.
We still got them.
Yeah, we got
If
it.
either party says they don't want to be a part of it, they
I
belong
would
to
bet there's
us.
probably 2 cities in Tarrant County that will do it themselves, and they're already doing it. Arlington and Fort Worth.
And that may be true, Commissioner. I anticipate that not all 41 municipalities will enter into an ILA with the county, possibly for cost reasons, or maybe they just don't have game room problems. But if they don't have an ILA with the county, then at that point, the game room administrator for the county, whomever that is, and this court will have to choose a hearing examiner, whether it be county court of law or whoever that is.
So for all intents and purposes, we control who we enter into ILA with.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct.
Just a point of clarification, and Commissioner, because you said they regulate their own game rooms, municipalities. Actually, municipalities don't have jurisdiction to do that. Only the county has jurisdiction to have a game room ordinance.
But if we do an interlocal, they can.
They'll simply enforce our game room ordinance.
So currently, what and how are Fort Worth and Arlington doing this, or do we have ILAs with them?
We don't have ILAs with them. The way they do that is through their zoning and also their certificates of occupancy.
So they don't have game room regulations. They have other methods in which administrative methods in which they kind of take care of that situation.
Can those regulations or zoning things preclude certain individuals from working within that establishment?
I'm not quite
I guess
sure.
what I'm saying is the regulation is what say if you have a Class B misdemeanor or above, you can't work in a game room. But that's the regulations which we are under.
Yes.
If they can't create regulations, then can they cause the same thing to happen through their zoning or through their certificate of occupancy rules? And if they can't, then that means that if they choose not to enter into an interlocal agreement with us, then at that point in time, we've got control of it, and that weeds out the employees. But currently, with the City of Arlington, that says City of Arlington and City of Fort Worth. Because we've not entered into any ILAs at this time, then that means that the rule regulating who can be employed is not enforced because we don't have a regulation and the ILAs aren't created.
I have not seen anything within the City of Arlington or the City of Fort Worth at this current moment that would stop that process, that would address that issue. That issue would be addressed by our regulations. Now, mind you, the City of Fort Worth, they're in litigation right now, and I've talked to someone from the city attorney's office today, and from what I understand, they're starting to brief this issue with the Supreme Court. So those ordinances are in litigation at the moment. So our regulations will really be, so to speak, the saving grace for the City of Fort Worth and for what they're going through. But moreover, from there, if the hearing examiner after you have the hearing, now the hearing must be done within 14 days after the notice of appeal has been turned into the game room administrator. So it has to happen pretty quickly. Once that hearing occurs, whoever loses that hearing, whether it be the hearing administrator or the applicant, can appeal to district court, and it's under a limited review at district court, which they can have that hearing and make a final determination of whether it was properly denied. So that's the basic process and the basic regulations. Of course, the regulations have a few more specifics in there, and I think the biggest thing, I want to be clear, I think the biggest thing is that we probably need to have, and come in front of this court, and I've talked to GK once or twice more to kind of flesh out this issue, give the court information, hear from the public. And so the court, because in Harris County's regulations, they make specific findings of the necessity for these regulations. And I think we have heard from the public before, and I think after today and maybe another public hearing, that it would have helped this court flesh out what it needs to know in order to make these decisions. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to go through this page by page. Some of the questions you already answered, but on page 7, where it references the game room permit fee limit, state statute says we can assess the fee up to $1,000, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we would still need to determine what our fee is going to be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
On page 8 for number 2, where it talks about if the proposed game room fails the initial inspection, a re-inspection will be performed. And unless I missed it, where does it say what the time frame is to do the re-inspection?
Well, on number 6, it says the applicant has 60 days from the initial inspection to complete the inspection process.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And the next step kind of in these regulations to address are the penalties if someone violates these regulations, because the local government code gives these regulations teeth, right? It gives these regulations, or gives the county authority to go after individuals who violate these regulations. First and foremost, those regulations are both criminal and civil. So if you knowingly violate these regulations, that's a Class A misdemeanor. And if you continue to violate those regulations, we can, of course, file in district court, get an injunction to stop you from violating those particular regulations that you violated. And also, each violation can have a civil penalty of up to $10,000 per violation. So it really has a financial and a criminal aspect here. Also, what we've done, which is a little different than Harris County, is when you go and you file your application, you're swearing that at that point that everything in that application is true and correct. So if you lie on that application, then that of itself is a penalty, and also it's a government document, so that's a separate criminal penalty as well. And through the civil process, we're also able to get costs and attorney's fees and stuff like that. Any questions about the penalties aspect or anything?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. So back to the fee on page 9, where number 6, it says a non-refundable application fee of $1,000. So we would have to determine who would be the game room administrator for the county, and then that would decide where in the budget this program would lie. Okay,
Absolutely.
and then where the money would go. And okay.
Absolutely.
Money's gonna go to the county,
Well, yeah, but
or the city if we do an ILA with the
Sure.
city. I guess that's what my understanding is.
That's exactly right.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you already addressed it about the hearing examiner. We would have to determine that. How was the on page 22 at the end where it talks about where a game room could be located? How was the footage determined? And is that just something that we mirrored from the Harris County and the Galveston County?
I'm sorry, where are you again?
Page
Commissioner?
22 at the bottom where it addresses distance restrictions.
Yes, that was specifically from the Harris County regulations, and frankly, the distance between game rooms We have increased that from the Harris County administration, from the Harris County regulations. And part of that, kind of the reasoning behind that, is we found two similar businesses, say McDonald's, and saw the average distance between those two. So we made sure that an individual that wants to have a game room is not precluded or injured from having a game room just because we have over strenuous distance requirements. We made sure that that can still work.
So, can I interrupt you for a minute and ask a question?
Yes, but I still have one more question.
Okay. The 1,500 or the 2 miles, how does that compare with our sexually oriented business distant requirements?
I have not compared it with the sexual-oriented business requirements, Judge.
I would a whole lot rather you kind of look at comparing it to that as opposed to comparing it to how close together McDonald's stores are.
I'll take a look at that. Absolutely.
Excuse me.
So then last question on page 26, where it gets into pretty significant detail on the food and beverage sales exemption.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, what page is that?
Page 26. Why is it so detailed? Like, is there a practice of a game room operator, like, just trying to do the bare minimum, or I mean something to where they're trying to skirt the
absolutely.
law,
And I've spoken to the city of Arlington about this, and they actually gave an actual example of someone attempting to skirt this issue.
Okay.
And what that is they say, hey, look, I'm running a restaurant here. And then you get there and you say, okay, well, I want to order some food. They're like, well, we don't really have any food here. Or we have, peanut butter and jelly or whatever that is, about 27 8-liners.
Okay.
And does this come then along that same type line? Because I know there are specific requirements in TABC that deals with whether you're a bar or whether you're a restaurant.
Yes. And
are these numbers that you're putting in here similar to those same requirements?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. 51%. I kind of, at the end of the executive summary, I just kind of put a few things that, just to kind of sum this up, a few things the court has to consider before passing regulations. Of course, the amount of public briefings, public testimony, the hours of operation for the game rooms, the identity of the game room permit administrator, the amount of the game room permit fee, the qualifications for a game room hearing examiner, and whoever this court wants to appoint, and then the distance restrictions. So those are just some of the things the court has to kind of consider moving forward. Any other questions for me?
Good job.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me be sure I understand one thing here.
Yes, sir.
Whether the county will allow interlocal agreements with surrounding municipalities.
Oh, yes, that was a deal with which, of course, you don't have to enter into the ILAs if you don't want to, but Harris County does, Galveston County does. I know Commissioner Brooks is a big thing for Commissioner Brooks as well. So this court doesn't have to, but typically from the major cities, they want to enter into these ILAs.
Okay. I have 4 people who have filed audience participation forms at this point in time that want to speak. I have 2 that have filed a form basically saying they support the county regulations but do not wish to comment. So I'm going to begin with our 4. The first one is Galen Gatton, Assistant City Attorney for, I'm assuming, the City of Arlington.
Yes, sir.
And please state your name and address, and then please make your comments.
Thank you, sir. Yes, my name is Galen Gatton. I'm Assistant City Attorney for the City of Arlington. My address is 101 South Mesquite Street, Suite 300, Arlington, Texas. Here today in support of the discussion that's been had. Also want to thank the District Attorney's Office. I have had some discussions with Mr. Taylor regarding the proposed regulations. If you have a copy of them. I'm here just mainly to make clear that the City of Arlington's position on the matter. I serve as the land use attorney, so unfortunately I'm very aware of certificates of occupancy and land use in the city of Arlington. I'm also here with our building official as well. And we are very familiar with game rooms, and the city is very much opposed to illegal gambling, which does run rampant with the game rooms. But I'm here today for two things. One, to make clear that as currently proposed under the Harris model, I believe the regulations would work very well with the cities if the county recognizes that they should be combined through the use of an interlocal agreement, so that we could avoid, I believe Commissioner Ficus was referring to, the idea of having a conflict between you've got a game room permit over here issued by the county, and then you've got a CO issued for some other use in the city limits, city of Arlington. So from our perspective, if, for instance, the city of Fort Worth, which has a tremendous issue with these game rooms, were to enter into an interlocal with Tarrant County, and if Tarrant County were to create a game room permit that said Tarrant County on it, but was issued by a designee for the city of Fort Worth within the municipality itself, then you could avoid the conflict of potentially having one hand doing one thing and one hand doing the other. And on top of that, I can tell you the city of Fort Worth and the city of Arlington are very familiar with administrative hearings, have to deal with them all the time, so it would not be an issue to set up the same process for an administrative hearing for this, just like any other permit that the city deals with. But the one thing I do know, you all are in the early stages of this, and so there's a lot of questions. As I heard Mr. Taylor referencing, you'll have to work on the tweaks, and so I just wanted to make clear that as currently submitted, the idea of an interlocal where the city still has the authority to issue a Tarrant County permit, we would certainly support that, but we want to make it clear we are opposed to the idea of Tarrant County issuing permits within city jurisdictions because of the exact issue that I'm afraid Commissioner Ficus referenced, the thought that someone gets this permit, then goes to the city and says, now you have to give me a CO for a game room. We say no, and then we wind up going to court over some sort of proposed vested interest. We would obviously be opposed to that. And the other thing, just to give you a point of reference on this, unfortunately, I didn't know much about the issues, so I called down to Harris County, spoke to several people, and one of the issues that I was made aware of is that there are still unincorporated areas in Harris County, and so their sheriff's office is issuing permits for it. But just to give you a perspective on the history of it, this was originally a city initiative. The city of Houston was regulating this. Then the game rooms ran to the unincorporated areas. Then Harris County got involved, and now what you're seeing is each one of the surrounding counties, and that's why you're seeing Galveston now getting involved, because they're just going farther out. And just for your knowledge, if you haven't already been advised, the one positive thing came out of the legislative session, that they now have made this applicable to every county in Texas. So hopefully we won't see any more of those bracketed language now. It'll be every county will potentially have this. So, but as proposed, we certainly see some positives to this, and definitely the city's always happy to work with the county in any way we can.
Yeah, the thing about Harris County, and Tasha and I, Dallas and Tarrant both have very little unincorporated area.
Yes, sir.
Over 50% of the 4.2 million people in Harris County live in the unincorporated area.
Yes, sir.
It's huge. So that's the reason why you've seen Harris County come in with that. But so I assume that what will happen is that in the course of us moving forward, Chris, that you'll work very closely with the city of Arlington and the city of Fort Worth, and then maybe any other municipalities who choose or who hope to have an interlocal agreement set up to do that and to go through that process.
Yes.
Your Honor, you raised
Galen, I want to thank you for your participation in this process and ask you to continue to work with the district attorney's office as we move our way through the answering of all these questions to make sure that we're on the same page.
Definitely. Well, always best when both hands know what they're doing, for sure.
Mr. Manius, you were going to say something?
Just a point. We have been working with the city managers of both Fort Worth and Arlington. Now that we've had this initial public hearing, we're going to reach out to the other municipalities also and make sure that they're aware of what we're doing here so that they can have comments also.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next is Rebecca Travis. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Travis.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. My name is Rebecca Travis.
You might go over that microphone, so.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. My name is Rebecca Travis, and I live in the Wedgwood area here in Tarrant County. I think today's a good day in Tarrant County, and I believe that these regulations are just what we need to give our law enforcement in the cities the needed tools to regulate the game rooms. I want to thank you for taking this step. I know it's not always easy to step out of your comfort zone and to write the regulations. You're doing the right thing by not taking the easy road, and I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing the last couple lines on the cover page filled out, and I just want to thank you guys again for everything you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Travis.
Next is Steve Epstein. Good morning, sir.
Hello, my name is Steve Epstein, and my address is 1617 Steinberg Lane in Fort Worth. I'm on the board of the Hallmark Camelot Highland Terrace Neighborhood Association, a neighborhood in the southern part of Fort Worth in Precinct 1. And we just wanted to voice our support for what you're doing here. Our neighborhood has been impacted. At our neighborhood meetings, our neighborhood officer reports to us about the crimes that surround the game rooms in our neighborhood. And so we would greatly benefit from your efforts here. And I realize there's a lot of, coming to this meeting, I realize there's a lot of details to work out. But I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming out today. Fred Fernandez.
Commissioners,
Good morning,
my name
sir.
is Fred Fernandez. I live in White Lake Hills in East Fort Worth. I'm also the president of the East Fort Worth Neighborhood Alliance. I'm also on the board of the Fort Worth League of Neighborhood Associations. A couple of years ago, we invited City Assistant Attorney Chris Mosley and police department to come and speak at one of our small town hall meetings, and we got an education on what some of the issues were with gaming rooms. We had many residents that were complaining about these issues. It seemed to be a source of all kinds of mischief and abuse and illegal activities. And I heard earlier in the conversation with this commission issues concerning cost to the applicants and so forth. I heard a testimony from a police officer that spoke at that town hall meeting a couple of years ago. They could close, an operation could open up in an unannounced vacant space. They could be raided. They could confiscate as much as $40,000 or more. They could confiscate the gaming machines. The city doesn't have resources to store that kind of equipment, so they pull the chips out of them and they sell them. They auction them off. And then that operation can open up again in another location within 30 days. There's a lot of money in this industry, and it allows for a lot of corruption. I think lobbying has allowed influenced our state legislators to allow for the exception of gambling that was passed back in the 1990s that have led to this nuisance that had been such an onerous issue to monitor, to maintain legal operations, that it's been a task that our city police have found just exhausting. It takes a lot of their resources to kind of police these facilities. I think we need to think about the cost it's costing all our municipalities in trying to keep things for the safety and welfare of our citizens and their cities. And the cost is more than I think any of us understands it is. Police time that could be doing other legal services versus monitoring these gaming rooms. So I applaud the effort here. I hope this commission understands what's at stake here, that what you do here matters. It matters for many families that are affected by these gaming facilities. Parents that are gambling addicts or addicts in other ways, or the prostitution that sometimes pops up in these gaming rooms as well. Some of the crimes are violent. I think so many, I hate to see what looks like is a tendency for us to grow into a Pottersville kind of a community. We need to protect our citizens. We need to protect our cities and our communities. And I encourage you, I plead with you, do the best you can to do this and do it right. This is our one chance. The only other option we have is to affect our state legislators, and I think the deep pockets are influencing them more than we can as individual citizens. So I ask each of you to do your best to service our community and our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Mitch, is it Rittman?
Thank you, Judge. My name is Mitch Reitman. I live in Fort Worth, and my office building is in Fort Worth. It's in Commissioner Brooks's area, just south of Trail Lake and I-20. I practiced accounting for 40 years, and my building is a small accounting firm that does nationwide consulting. We moved there a few years ago. If you're familiar with the neighborhood, it's Wedgwood. It's a very strong blue-collar, middle-class neighborhood, very up-and-coming, very promising, 70% minority, 30% immigrant. We never thought we'd have a safety issue right next to us. I built my building and put a lot of money into it. About 3 years ago, the game room opened next door to us, and within about 2 or 3 months, they opened up 2 more. You think of these as an industrial area or someplace where there's not a lot of people around. This is right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It's literally 20 feet from my door. The police were out 60 times in 2017, 120 times in 2018, and already 55 times this year. We've had about 40 assaults. We've had 2 or 3 aggravated assaults. We had an armed robbery. I was up during tax season, looked out my window, and there's a guy putting a ski mask on, putting a gun in his belt to go rob the place. I've tried to take civil action against these people, but they have no CO from the city. They have no record for the Secretary of State. They have no tax permit. They have no assumed name certificate. They have nothing. I even sent a private detective out to try to find out who owns the place. We can't find who they are to sue to try to get an injunction against them. The police have shut them down 4 times. They've gone in, and it's tasked to cost the police department a lot of money. They've sent detectives in. They've observed illegal gambling going on in there, and they've shut the business down, taken out the machines. Within about a week and a half, they're back in operating again. And I've been struggling for 3 years, begging. I went down to the state during the legislative session, begging for somebody to do something to regulate these businesses. I can understand that they're giving away fuzzy animals. When I went down to the state, a guy came representing, he said Chuck E. Cheese, and said they don't want to drive Chuck E. Cheese out of the. This is nothing at all to drive Chuck E. Cheese out. This is limiting a criminal enterprise that, regardless how you feel about gambling, this is bringing criminal element into residential neighborhoods that are going out looking for money and committing crimes. I've had windows broken in my vehicles. My employees are afraid to leave after dark. I have off-duty police officers in Houston watching my cameras 24 hours a day, and they call the police out on an average of 3 or 4 times a month to investigate illegal activity on my premises. Commissioner Ficus, I think you asked about the issue with a certificate of occupancy and a license to do business. When I opened up my office, they didn't check with the State Board of Accountancy to see if I was licensed to practice accounting. They just wanted to make sure the building was safe and it complied with the fire code. And it was up to me to make sure I was licensed. And we also specialize in the security industry. I have an alarm company manager's license, and all my employees are alarm company employees. We're registered with DPS. They didn't all have to be registered, just me, to open the business up. But every time I hire somebody, they've got to be registered and renewed. This ordinance is very similar to that. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the six machine limit. I realize you have distances, but the one next door to us only has 4 machines. And from what I understand from Councilman Jordan, they're doing about $10,000 a week of revenue out of those machines. And so this ordinance may not affect business that small. So I'm a little concerned about that. I spent some years on a city council in the 90s. I understand when you're developing an ordinance like this, you're walking a fine line between helping the citizens and eliminating crime and getting sued. But, and I understand these people have pretty powerful lawyers and pretty organized, but I think if you regulate them and you make them do what they're supposed to do toe the line, especially finding out who owns them and who's operating them so you can find them. So guys like me can take civil action against them if they get out of hand. And making sure they don't have the employees that are criminals. The guy that robbed the place in January, the police recognized right away. He was on parole. He was a former employee of the game room. And they picked him up within 2 or 3 hours and threw him in jail on a parole violation. So it wasn't really a problem. But this is what you have in there. It's not the gambling per se. It's a criminal element that these places attract. Here I am, an accountant trying to run an accounting firm, and I'm having trouble finding employees that want to come to work in what is really a nice neighborhood, but for the gaming rooms.
Mr. Rodman, let me ask you,
Sure.
or let me address a question that you raised with our attorney. I guess the first one is that it has 4 machines. That is prescribed by the state law. We cannot affect anything that has less than 6 machines.
That is correct.
Now, what if the same, now, I know he also indicated he's having problems finding out who owns the place. In our application, it implies pretty strongly, I think, that the person who applies for this, or who's going to own this, must apply in person.
Absolutely. Not only does it do that, Judge, but we also need to know who are the owners of the business entity, who owns the machines, who's the person standing in front of us. Everyone associated with that game room must be identified.
You've addressed that very well.
But let me ask this question. What happens if this person owns 4 machines in this suite, moves right next door, has 4 more, but owns within a particular area or within the county? You know, they may own 100 machines, but they have them positioned out to where they only have 5 in each location.
And I think there's 2 ways to address that. First and foremost is our distance requirements will take care of a lot of that stuff. But if they do that, or they try to even put one right outside the distance requirement, I would argue, and I'd be willing to take that to our district court to say simply that's an extension of one game room. It's just a charade trying to get around some all.
Well, let's say they go 5 miles out. I mean, can we make the regulation to where it basically says if you own and operate more than 5 machines within the county, then you're going to come under these regulations?
That has not been addressed, Your Honor. I would have to address that.
Please do.
I can definitely answer that question probably in a closed session.
Please.
But I will.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, this is a big step forward. I'm sorry I'm so emotional about this, but it's driving me crazy for 3 years. I'm an honest business guy trying to make a living and I'm fearing for the safety of my employees. This isn't everything I'd want to see, but we're limited by what the state says, limited by what I'm sure the county's going to get sued over. But it's a big step for guys like me to try to eliminate a serious problem to a very well-meaning neighborhood.
And please take my statement lawyer. I don't mind getting sued as long as I think we got a chance of winning, because as I often say, we pay our people in that building by the year, and those people are going to pay their attorneys by the hour, and I hope ours wear them out.
Judge Whitley, when I was on the city council, the constable knew my address. I got sued more than I've ever in my life.
But this ordinance is not going to eliminate your problem, is it?
Well, it will, because there's another room that's in the same center, and I think that they're both owned by the same people, and it'll keep them from demising these places down to get below the limit of machines. The biggest issue it's going to solve is I know where to find these guys now. And I've sent a private detective in there, and he saw them doing illegal gambling.
I'm afraid that what Commissioner Johnson's saying is correct. If what we're being told is that 5 machines or less, we may not be able to require any permit process, and therefore we can't figure out, we won't know who the owner is. Is that correct?
Well, I think that is correct to the way it reads, Judge. I think that when you have a situation in which you have one giant area in which you have several game rooms and you have 3 or 4 apiece on all.
Yeah, but how are we going to compel them to tell us that they are subject to the regulation when there's only 4 or 5 in each one of the locations?
Judge, if they're operating illegally, they're not giving away fuzzy dogs, they're giving away cash, that could be one machine. And they could be shut down. Now, obviously, I guess they can reopen, but they've got to go through a system. They could be shut down if they're operating gambling illegally. And that's the only way this business model works. It doesn't work giving away fuzzy animals.
Absolutely.
Unless you're Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, most of these situations, you have gambling issues. So whether you have 2 machines or 27 machines, if you have illegal gambling, it is therefore unlawful. You uphold the process. So this is only.
Yeah, but we have that process right now regardless.
Absolutely.
And it's not solving the problem.
I'm not sure about that particular situation, but I
And-
know our sheriff before has done through civil forfeitures.
And there's no way we can require even those locations with 5 or less to at least identify who their owners are.
I'll take a look at that, Judge.
Please do, because again, in my mind, that's the only way we can determine whether they're skirting the law by putting in 5, but you may have the same individual owning hundreds of machines throughout the county.
Yes, and also the fact that if they're operating without a certificate of occupancy, that's another issue as well, which is kind of outside of our realm.
Sounds like we still got a way to go, but we're heading in the right direction at this point.
Baby steps, and if there's an ordinance that I can see they're violating by trying to skirt it with demising down spaces, at least there's an ordinance they're violating. We can get you to investigate and see if they're playing around with the rules. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to
I
hear me.
promise you, we're going to do the best we can do with the authority we've been given.
I appreciate this so much. I've run into dead ends everywhere, but here at the county, I really appreciate it.
Well, and I would encourage you to continue to communicate with your state representatives and state senators.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have anyone else who is registered to speak at this time. If you're out there and you want to talk, raise your hand and we'll fill you out a form right quick. I see no hands going up in the air. That being, come on down, but you're going to have to fill out a form. You got a form?
I don't have a form.
Well,
come on down.
Okay, but just get a form.
We'll make sure she fills one out.
Okay, come on down. Give us your name and your address, and then.
My name.
Go ahead.
Sorry. My name's Kara Cheney. I'm in Eastern Hills, 5733 Jacqueline Road, Fort Worth. I really just wanted to come in, same as everyone else here, thank you for trying to address this. There's not a lot of people that are able to make these meetings, but please know that the lack of people showing up, I didn't know until last night about this. So it doesn't mean that there's a lack of utter frustration by the communities. I mean, ultimately, I just want to kind of let you know, as far as a resident,
You're okay.
longtime resident of East Fort Worth, I moved away. I was there for the gangs to come in. I've seen it in a really bad place. I've seen the neighborhoods and communities there really hold it down and keep it great, and kind of bringing it up to, okay, maybe we can get some interest. But then the entrance to my neighborhood, there's only a few in East Fort Worth. The entrance to my neighborhood is 2 game rooms. They've taken over the entrance to my whole community, and it's not just my neighborhood, it's several neighborhoods. I can't shop there. I go to Hearst and Arlington. So it's not just the municipal resources of the police and the crime. Yes, that's horrible and frustrating, and I've never seen the community in as bad as this condition. But on top of it, you're losing a lot of shopping dollars from our community, because there's no way I'm going to go into any of those convenience stores where, these people they're rough. It's rough. It's a rough little space. It's not always been that way, but I can tell you that it's very clearly, directly related to the game rooms. And I don't know how it's going to resolve mine, because I think there's one that has 2 game rooms and another that maybe has 4. So I don't know how it's going to resolve this issue, but please just know that we got to do something, or we're going to lose the momentum that we've built this whole time to try and reinvigorate our community. So
Thank
that's
you
it.
very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, before we recess, Commissioner Fickus, I
I've
believe.
got an appointment, if I could. This is for James Fletcher to the DHS Advisory Board. James is a Colleyville resident.
We have a motion and a second.
Didn't we do this last week?
We
No.
talked about it, but we didn't do it.
No, I was gonna get a resume.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius, I believe that concludes all the.
That's all we have this time.
And at this time, we will recess our open meeting, proceed to close to discuss items exempt under section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code.
I'm gonna take this down and load it.
Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time,
I'm here.
we're adjourned.
Hello.